gradually we want to change all the story. Okay, let's summarize first the story here. The story here is that if output increase, employment will increase. That means unemployment will decrease. And according to the wage setting, wages will increase if unemployment increase. According to the aggregate supply and the price setting, if wages increase, price will increase. And that leads to the aggregate supply curve. Okay, this is very clear. So now what we are doing, just change everything with the growth. So in other words, we are not talking about the increase of Y, but we are talking about the growth of the increase. You understand my point here now? The growth of the increase. So let's just put growth in every single component here. So here is what I done. Growth of Y increases. Growth of employment increases. Growth of unemployment decreases. Growth of wages increases. And growth of price increases. Okay? So the only thing I changed is from the level that increased, now the growth. Okay, that's the only thing. Everything else remained the same. Okay, so let's pay attention on the last part here. Growth of the price increase. What is the meaning of the growth of the price? Well, growth of the price is inflation, right? So if the growth of price increases, that means inflation rate increases. So that means I can write the growth of price, which is this guy, which is equal to inflation rate. Let's change that with symbol pi. So pi means inflation rate. Okay. The reason I'm doing this is that because in practical terms, aggregate supply relation, which shows the relation between output and price, in more cases, in more actual cases, policymakers are not looking at the price level. Instead, they are looking at the inflation rate. Just open any newspaper or any economic media, magazine, and so forth. They are hardly talking about the level of the price. What they are talking about is the inflation rate.
Excuse me,
inflation
sir, can
increase and decrease. Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So, what you're saying is should we focus more on the growth rates or the level itself? That's my question.
Yeah, right now. Okay, it doesn't, okay, everything that we discussed so far until we generate aggregate supply remains intact, remains okay. But now I have a special purpose, and you will see in a few seconds what is my main purpose here. My main purpose is, now I'm trying to change the y-axis. Remember, in the aggregate supply, the y-axis is price, right? And the x-axis is the output. What I'm trying to say here is that in reality, society or policymakers, what they're looking at is not really the level of the price. What they're looking is the inflation rate. So how do I convert the level of price into inflation rate? That's my question now, basically. I want to change the y-axis from price to inflation rate. That's my goal here. So one way to do it is stick with the relation, okay? But now change everything with the growth. Why? Because eventually I want to have the growth of price, which is inflation, right? And that is what I got here. So the growth of price, which is the inflation, which is by definition is this, okay? Now let me give the symbol pi. Let me repeat why I'm doing this, because I want to change the y-axis here with pi, with the inflation rather than the price level. I hope you all know, right, that inflation is basically the change in the price, okay? It's not the level of the price. Okay, so I want to change that into the change in the price, which is the inflation rate. So once I'm able to do that, then I can draw this line basically here. Okay. Why? Because now what I'm talking about is the change in the inflation rate. So let's say 5t minus 5t minus 1. Okay, that means inflation at t minus inflation at t minus 1. What does it mean? That means the change in the inflation rate. So once I have that change of the inflation rate, which is this guy, okay, this is the change of the inflation rate, and I keep the x-axis output, then I got a new curve, and let's call that curve PC. In fact, there's a reason why they call it PC, because this is the name of a person, Phillip. So PC stands for Phillip's curve. My point here is that, yes, aggregate supply is very important for the analytical purpose. But for practical purpose, for policy making purpose, they don't look at the level of the price. Instead, they look at the change in the inflation. Again, if you don't believe me, just randomly, why don't you randomly collect any magazine or newspaper or any media which is dealing with economics? Most of the time they talk, oh, the inflation rate goes up or inflation rate goes down. What does that mean? That means they're talking about this. They're not talking about the price level. They're talking about the change in the inflation rate, whether the inflation rate goes up or goes down. Now, that is not only the reason, by the way. From the practical purpose, yes, that is the reason. Because in reality, people talk about the change in inflation rate. But there is another more fundamental and more theoretical reason for macroeconomics. And that is to see the relation between inflation and the unemployment. Remember, we are still in a labor market here. So let me ask you, suppose I want to relate this inflation with unemployment instead of output here. What do you think the relation? What is the relation between inflation and unemployment? That's my question. Is it positive or is it negative? If you pay attention to all the explanation that I gave you today, you should be able to answer this. Let me repeat the question and then I'm going to hear volunteers. What is the relation between inflation rate and the unemployment rate? Is it positive or is it negative?
Sorry?
Yeah.
The relation between unemployment and inflation rate is negative.
Can you explain why? Just look at the note that we just discussed 5 minutes ago.
And when the inflation happens, so the wages will also increase. So the demand for labor would decrease because now the employers have to pay more. Is that so, sir?
Yeah, but what is the relation with unemployment? The question is unemployment.
So when the wages increase, the employers choose to have fewer employees.
Okay. Yeah. All right. That's correct answer. So now you know the relationship between unemployment and inflation, which is negative, right? What you are just saying is nothing but one of the most fundamental macroeconomic theory on labor market and macroeconomics, and that is Phillip's curve. So precisely what you're saying is that Phillip's curve is nothing but the curve that shows the negative relation between inflation and unemployment.